Hello guys, welcome back to TFD. So today we've got a rumor surrounding the Indiana Fever that, honestly, I think almost every single fan would be excited about if it actually happens. And it's not some blockbuster, headline-grabbing superstar move. It's not something flashy. But sometimes the smartest moves aren't flashy. They're just smart basketball. And that rumor is the potential return of Temi Fagbenle. Now let's just talk about this for a second, because I feel like Temi is one of those players who doesn't always get the respect she deserves. She's not going to be the number one option. She's not even going to be your second option most nights. But what she is exactly the kind of player winning teams need. She's a high-level role player. And not just that, she's a starting caliber role player. Like, people forget this, but at the beginning of last season, Temi was starting games. She was playing meaningful minutes on a competitive roster. She was doing all the little things: defending, running the floor, finishing inside, making smart decisions. That stuff matters, especially for a young team like Indiana. Now, yes, eventually the rotation changed. Players like Ileana Rupert stepped in and took on a bigger role. And let's be real, Rupert is incredibly talented. There's no shame in losing minutes to someone like that. That's just competition at the highest level. But that doesn't take away from what Temi brings. And this is where it gets interesting for the Fever. Because right now, if you look at their front court rotation, it's solid, but not perfect. You've obviously got Aaliyah Boston, who is the cornerstone. She's your franchise big, no questions asked. Then you've got players like Mobley, as mentioned, who, again, is a good player. I actually like her game a lot. She can score, she can rebound, she fits well offensively. But if we're being honest, she's more of a borderline starter than a lock-in elite-level starter. And that's where Temi fits in perfectly, because she gives you options. She can start if needed, she can come off the bench, she can play the 4, she can play the 5. She runs the floor hard, which is huge if you're trying to build around a fast-paced offense led by someone like Caitlin Clark. And defensively, that's where she really stands out. People don't realize this, but statistically, Temi has been right up there with some of the better defenders in the league. She's active, she's physical, she contests everything, and she doesn't take plays off. And let's address the narrative that always comes up: she's injury-prone. No, she's not. She had a couple of injuries close together, and suddenly people label her. But if you actually look at her full career, she's been available way more often than not. She plays year-round, she competes in the offseason, and she's proven she can stay on the court. We've seen this happen before with other players too. One injury, maybe two, and suddenly there's this reputation that just sticks, even when it's not really accurate. Now, let's talk about what went wrong before, because the Fever had Temi, and they let her walk. And if we're being completely honest, it wasn't a great decision. They prioritized keeping Dana Evans, and in doing so, they lost a player who filled a very important role in their system, and you could argue that the roster construction suffered because of that. That's why this potential reunion matters, because it feels like correcting a mistake. Now, looking at her most recent stint with the Golden State Valkyries, it doesn't seem like they're aggressively trying to lock her down long-term. And that's always something to watch in free agency. If a team really values a player, you usually hear about it. You hear about negotiations, offers, interest, and in this case, things have been relatively quiet. Instead, you're hearing them linked to other names like Gabby Williams and focusing on different roster priorities. So that opens the door. And for Indiana, this could be a low-risk, high-reward move. Because let's talk money for a second. Would you rather pay a player like Alana Smith a massive contract, something in that million-plus range, or bring in someone like Temi for half that price who gives you maybe 80 to 90% of the production? For me, it's an easy answer. You don't need to overpay. You don't need a poison pill contract. You just need value. If you can get Temi on something like a 2-year deal, league average salary, maybe 500 to 600K range, that's a win. That's roster flexibility. That's depth. That's smart team building. And depth is something the Fever desperately need. Because right now, if you look across their lineup, there are still question marks. Take the wing rotation, for example. You've got players like Lexi Hall and Sophie Cunningham, both solid players, both can contribute, but depending on who starts, you're either getting a weaker starting option or a weaker bench. It's that balance that hasn't quite been figured out yet. And the same logic applies to the front court. If you rely too heavily on one player, you expose a weakness. But if you build depth, if you have 2 or 3 players who can rotate, who can step in, who can maintain the level of play, you cover that weakness. That's exactly what Temi provides. She doesn't have to be your star, she just has to be reliable. And if Indiana wants to play fast, which they should given their roster, then having multiple bigs who can run the floor, defend, and rotate in and out is crucial. You can't play at a high tempo with a thin rotation. You just can't. Now, there's also the bigger picture to consider. What are the Fever actually trying to build? Are they going all in right now? Are they trying to develop? Are they balancing both? Because if they're trying to compete while developing young talent, then players like Temi are perfect. Veterans who understand their role, who bring energy, who don't need the ball to be effective. And that's especially important when you have a young star like Caitlin Clark leading the offense. You need players who complement her, not players who take away from what she does best. And we've already seen that Temi can do that. In fact, when you look back at certain lineups from last season, when you had Temi, Caitlin, Aaliyah, and others on the floor together, those units were incredibly effective. Statistically, they were among the best lineups the team had. That's not a coincidence. That's fit. So now the question becomes, will it actually happen? Because there have been rumblings. There's been talk that Indiana is interested, that they're looking to fill out those final roster spots carefully. And that might also explain some of the delays we're seeing with other moves, whether it's contract situations, extensions, or just waiting to see how free agency plays out. Teams don't operate in isolation. Every move affects another. So if the Fever are waiting, if they're being patient, it might be because they're trying to land a player like Temi. And if they do, it might not be the move that dominates headlines, but it could be one of the moves that actually matters most. Because at the end of the day, winning teams aren't just built on stars. They're built on players who do their job, who play hard, who fit the system, and who make everyone around them better. And that's exactly what Temi Fagbenle does. So yeah, if this rumor turns into reality, I think Indiana Fever fans will be very, very happy. Anyway, that's it for this one. Tell me what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys.
Be proud of. I'm just very proud of this whole team for how...
Look at Clark looking to push. Ahead for Fagbenle. Level again. Beautiful.